Friends, good morning. It is wonderful to be with you this morning. I want to talk about our hearts this morning, which is always a very sensitive topic because our hearts are where the most sensitive things are. When I was growing up, my dad, when we were going into like stores where there was fragile stuff, I would always get a very stern talking to before we went into the store, just keep your hands in your pockets, Patrick, bull in a china shop. And I certainly don't want to be a bull in the china shop when it comes to our hearts. I want to share all of this with great reverence to your heart. So I just would ask, as we're listening this morning, don't just pay attention to the words that I'm saying. I just really want to encourage us to pay attention to the things that might be moving in our hearts. So I want to start with this. So throughout the Gospels, throughout Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus asks 307 questions, which I was kind of shocked by. That was a question that occurred to me when I was praying through the gospel this weekend, and I was led to go to where we all go with our very deep queries. I went to Wikipedia, did some extensive research, and that was the number that popped up. Whether or not that's actually true, I'm not sure, but we're going to go with that for today. It's a lot of questions. I just want to focus on one of those 307 questions, and it turns out that the question I want to focus on, the question that we hear Jesus asking in this gospel today, it's the exact same question we heard him ask last week. It's the same question. What do you want me to do for you? 2 weeks in a row, we were reflecting on Jesus asking that question. So what I want to do is I want to focus on that question. I want us to notice the kindness that's coming out of Jesus' heart and asking it as a way to kind of elicit out of us what's most real, what's most vulnerable, what's most honest, to have that dialogue, which we would say, like, that's what prayer is. Real, honest dialogue, heart to heart with the Lord. So last week, just to jog your memory, 29th Sunday, we had the encounter with James and John, the sons of Zebedee, aka the sons of thunder. They approached Jesus and they said to him, "Master, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you," which is a great way to approach Jesus. Okay. And he asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" They say, "Command that when you come into your glory, we may sit one at your right and one at your left." Recall how Jesus responded to them. He basically says, "You don't know what you're asking. I get what you're asking, but you don't know what you're asking. This is not about power, boys." He flips everything on their head. He says, this is about love. This kingdom that I'm establishing is one of love, which means that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus came to be the self-offering, and he's inviting all of us, especially as apostles, into that posture of self-gift. He's like, it's not about the thrones. It's not about the thrones. So again, today's gospel we just heard, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, he's blind, which means in the ancient world he had to be a beggar. He's sitting by the roadside, and he hears a crowd approaching. You have to imagine, in his blindness, all of his other senses have been heightened. How often he probably sat by the roadside, was picking up little snippets of conversation, eavesdropping in as people were walking by. I'm sure he had heard stories of this Yeshua, this Jesus of Nazareth. You wonder if sitting there he had heard anything about the healing miracles, if he had heard the story as someone was walking by. Did you hear what he did in Capernaum? Like there was a man who was deaf and mute and he healed him. Or did you hear what he did to the man who was crippled and lame, how he said, "Rise, take up your mat and walk"? Or did you hear that he raised a girl from the dead? I don't think that one's true. No, I heard it was true. My cousin told me. Blah, 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 blah. He's picking up all these stories about Yeshua from Nazareth, the line of David. So there he is this day. He's sitting by the roadside, hearing this crowd draw near, and he hears that name, Yeshua, Yeshua. And if you're Bartimaeus, you're thinking, this might be my only opportunity. This is my moment. This is the shot. This is my chance. And so he cries out, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." In the Greek, we hear eleison me, which is what we say at the beginning of Mass, Kyrie eleison, have mercy, Lord, have mercy. Every single Mass, we start Mass crying out with Bartimaeus' cry, Lord, have pity on me. Lord, have mercy on me. And there's some in the crowd we hear who rebuke him. They effectively tell him, hey, shut up. Stop doing that. Quiet. We've got better things to worry about. This is the Messiah, after all. Do you think he's going to be bothered with someone like you? Be quiet. That's enough out of you. But Bartimaeus doesn't listen. He keeps crying out all the more, and I love that about Bartimaeus. Jesus stops, and he turns, and he says, call him. So they go to him. They say, get up. Take courage. Jesus is calling you. Friends, this is another homily for another day, but I wouldn't be a priest had people in my life not said those words to me. Patrick, get up. Jesus is calling you. This weekend in the diocese, we celebrate Priesthood Sunday. It's a day to reflect on the gift of the priesthood and the gift of those who are discerning the call, those who are in the seminary, and those who are thinking about seminary life. And look, we've got to become more and more a parish that says to our young people, especially to our young men, hey, look, get up. Jesus is calling you. Take courage. He's calling you. Ask him what he's calling you to, right? Okay, that's another homily for another day. I digress. Okay, back to Bartimaeus. So he's at the roadside. He throws aside his cloak and he makes his way to Jesus, who asks him the question that we just heard. The same question James and John asked. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asks him. And notice Bartimaeus' response. Master, I want to see. And we know how the rest of the story goes, right? He recovers his sight and he begins to follow Jesus. Here's what I want to do. I want to tease out some of the very subtle and very important details in this moment for us. Namely, this. What is different about James and John's request from Bartimaeus's? In other words, why did Jesus say no to them and yes to him? What's the difference? I'll put it this way. Whereas James and John, they approached Jesus from this posture of, manipulation with this air of control, power seeking, right? We want thrones, one at your right, one at your left. Bartimaeus, he cries out to Jesus from his poverty, from his need, from his littleness. I'll put it this way. He let the littlest parts, the most sensitive parts of his heart speak to Jesus. And that makes all the difference. There's such a difference between we want you to do whatever we ask of you and Son of David, have pity on me. Do you feel that difference? There's such a difference there. Right? He asked the question, what do you want me to do for you? Master, I want to see. Which is very different than we want prominence. We want power. We want to be seated on thrones next to you with authority. Before we're too quick to judge James and John, I want to point this out, that both James and John and Bartimaeus, what they are asking for, it is, for both of them, it's issuing from deep places of their hearts. It's issuing from deep places of their hearts, but the difference is that Bartimaeus, his expression, what he shares, it's raw and unfiltered. He's just exposing the deepest, most honest need to Jesus. He's not telling him the solution. He's just exposing the weakness. He's exposing the need. Whereas James and John, they're hiding all of their littleness. They're hiding their poverty. They're hiding this ache. And instead they demand Jesus to be a genie and just fix it for them the way that they think will solve their problem. Here's what I mean. Imagine if James and John went about it differently. Imagine if they had, instead of saying to Jesus, we want thrones and positions of prominence, imagine if they had just said to Jesus, Jesus, we want to feel important. We want to feel like we matter. We're afraid of being forgotten. Imagine if they were actually honest about what they were really, really looking for. What if they had allowed the littlest parts of their hearts to speak to him? Because behind these big men, behind these guys asking for thrones, are the hearts of two little boys who are just scared and are honestly hoping that they're going to matter. And that's beautiful. But they didn't lead with that. They led with their solution. Like beneath the grasping for power and control, there was this littleness, a little heart, a little need, a desire to be affirmed, to know that we're important, to know that we matter, and all of that's good. And instead of just exposing that to Jesus, instead of just saying the real thing, they wanted him to do what they thought would make the littleness go away. We want to feel important, so then you should just put us on thrones, because that will make us feel good. Bartimaeus did the opposite of James and John. He just showed him the real thing. He showed Jesus the real ache, the painful thing. He didn't ask Jesus for a solution. He just showed him the littleness. So friends, what might this sound like in our life? What might this sound like in our dialogue with the Lord? So Jesus asks you. Right now, he's asking, what do you want me to do for you? Just notice maybe what bubbles up in your heart. Maybe the initial response is, Jesus, I want you to get me a new job. Or maybe it's, Jesus, I want you to make my kids come back to church. Or Jesus, I want you to fix my marriage. Or maybe it's, Jesus, I want you to find me a husband. I want you to find me a wife. Or maybe, again, with great reverence, maybe it's, Jesus, I so want to get pregnant. All right. Whatever it is that bubbled up, and maybe you don't know right now, but maybe if it was something like that, and I say this again with great reverence, instead of just treating Jesus like the James and John genie who just want him to fix the problem, like I want it to be fixed, let us do the Bmus approach and actually show him what's beneath that response. Right? So again, Jesus asks the question, what do you want me to do for you? What's beneath the thing that you just want me to fix? Can you tell me the real thing you're looking for? Jesus, I want you to get me a new job, because right now I feel so worthless. Jesus, I don't want to feel worthless. Jesus, I want you to make my kids come back to church, because then I wouldn't feel like such a failure. I wouldn't feel like I'm this disappointment. I wouldn't be so embarrassed about my other friends whose all their kids are in church. Jesus, I guess I really just want you to tell me that I'm good, that I'm not a disappointment. Jesus, I just want you to fix my marriage, because then I wouldn't feel so scared of being abandoned and so scared of being alone. I guess, Jesus, I just want to feel secure and safe in someone's love for me. Jesus, I want you to find me a husband. I want you to find me a wife, because I'm so afraid nobody will ever love me. It's because, Jesus, I just want to be found. I want to be sought after. I want to be pursued and found desirable. I want to be a gift to somebody. Jesus, I just want a baby, because then I would feel worthy. Then I wouldn't wonder all the time if you had forgotten me. Jesus, I just want to feel like I've been chosen by heaven for a great mission of motherhood or fatherhood. Friends, Bartimaeus, such a beautiful heart, such a beautiful heart. Bartimaeus teaches us that when we show Jesus, when we share with Jesus, when we expose to Jesus the deeper thing, the raw desire beneath it, when we let the little parts speak, that's when he's finally able to pour in mercy and peace and healing, bearing in mind that the solution that he might be giving us, it might not at all be the solution that we think that we need, or the solution that we think will solve the problem. But the thing is, he's far more creative than you or I. Oftentimes it's just our embarrassment of our hearts and what's actually in there that almost always prevents us from actually receiving the grace that we most want to receive. We're so afraid of actually saying the real thing. We do this to him and we do this to each other all the time. Spouses, you do this to each other all the time. The fights that you have aren't really about the things that you're saying. There's things underneath the surface that you're so afraid to actually say. We're so afraid to say the real thing. But the real thing is the only thing that God can actually deal with, because he is the most real thing. So often we treat our hearts like the crowd treated Bartimaeus. Like there's little parts of our hearts that are asking and crying out, and we say to our hearts, shut up. Stop talking. Be quiet. Like that's too embarrassing. That's not the way to receive healing. Friends, Jesus in this Mass right now, he's asking the same question that he asked James and John. It's the same question he asked Bartimaeus. What do you want me to do for you? For you. What's the littlest part of your heart? He's not asking hypothetically or rhetorically. Nothing that we're doing here is hypothetical or rhetorical. This is real. So let's call upon this apostle of the little heart, Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, the blind man, who, because he let the littlest part of his heart speak, this is a blind man who now sees, and sees everything differently. May that be our story too.